Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm Chives alongside the main man, Steve-O, ready to rock like Glock Purdy.
Hmm.
Steve-O, or Tommy Touchdowns. That's a little more geographically, I think that would be more geographically conscious of us to start the episode with a little Tommy DeVito reference. Hail to the king there, 5-8 Giants. I know, Steve-O, you're a G-Men guy. So, good Monday night game. At the point where you're listening to this, the Leafs game has happened, but there's plenty of storylines that we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, we are. First of all, somebody get Tommy his cutlets. Chives, coming off LTIR. Look great, sound great, sickness is off. So great to have you back here at 100%. Chives, we got a lot to talk about. So let's not waste any time. Let's talk some puck. Coming off a strong performance on Sunday night against the Kings, we got a lot to jump into. Where do you want to attack this first?
John Quick's energy was electric. Like, getting into the scrums. And it's funny because the players always say, like, fans, the media, they're looking for something, right? Like, oh, what was involved with that? I think his emotions for playing his former team and how that ended were not like directly influencing or like on his mind in that moment. I think it was just like Byfield getting in the mix of things, giving him a little jab. Quick was not having that. He was on fire. All right, let's actually talk, Steve-O. Third jerseys. How did we like them? I thought they looked better in person, and I was the biggest hater.
I wouldn't want to call myself a hater on them. To me, they're mid. Like, I think when you have, we've had better alternate jerseys. And
Yeah.
I think compared to some of the ones we've had in the past, especially stemming back the Rick Nash days, those were King, Lady Liberties. I just think we've had some better ones, and these are not bad. I know that a lot of people are hating on these, and I thought this was really interesting. Ranger fans tend not to like them from what I've seen. And other people, like fans of other teams around the NHL, they seem to like them. So I think it's interesting. I think based on those or based on these numbers, you could kind of correlate that the Ranger fans, again, we've had better alternates. Again, on the ice, they didn't really look that bad. Would I
No.
go out and buy one? No, probably not.
Hmm.
But I didn't think they were that bad. And listen, if we play like we did in those jerseys, we should wear them every freaking game.
You know what? I agree, Steve-O. I thought like Washington. By the way, Adam Fox 300th NHL game in Washington. I literally didn't. That flew over my head. We got that in the post game report. I look back at it because like that was such a drop of a game. I just went right to writing the takeaways on it. Um, but yeah, so Adam Fox, he's back, back in action. With that, team looked really good. Defense was like really limiting the opportunities of the LA Kings on the rush. And that was a problem stemming to Nashville, where it was like blatantly obvious that the Rangers were giving up odd man rush after odd man rush. Talked to Greg Wyshynski, actually, not on the record, but I asked him at the Garden. This was in the preseason. I said, what's the one thing that the Rangers don't have still? And he said, I don't know about their speed, and I don't know about how they can reduce Carolina and New Jersey's speed. Well, lo and behold, they were able to fix that against, at least in one game against LA, start to turn things around. And we'll talk about later in the episode, the Hurricanes and Devils are struggling. So the Rangers do have aspects to their game that I think coming into the season we didn't give enough credit to. Jonathan Quick, he was the story against the Kings. But players like Jonny Brodzinski, VC, Will Cooley are the goal scorers. Great. Mika getting on the score sheet. Great. Limiting rush attempts coming on the Rangers' way on the defensive side of the puck. Great. Playing a little chippy. You get Barclay Goodrow back, donning some jerseys that rest of the league likes. Ranger fans might not be huge on, but you get the dub in them. I know that was a problem last year with the Liberty jerseys last year. I thought they were better than the first go around of the like redub of the Liberty jerseys, but oh boy, they lost like every game in those.
Yeah, and listen, I think the big storyline out of this, like you mentioned, is Johnny Quick. I mean, there's a point where actually I'll save that. I'll save the negative for my last point. But let's go positives. Why not? Obviously we knew this coming into this game. the Kings are one of the hottest teams right now in the NHL. And not only that, but they've been one of the best 5-on-5 teams in hockey this year. And I thought, to me, I thought we played that pretty well. I wouldn't want to say Quick was tested a whole lot, Chives, with quality opportunities. But when push came to shove, he came up with the key saves, especially when there was a lot of scrambles in front of the net and the Rangers came out and he got them. Now, this kind of leads me, and I'm sure we'll jump into this in a question later on in the segment, but Jonathan Quick, I mean, we've seen this time and time again this season. Jonathan Quick has kind of been, I mean, he's been outstanding, man. You look at his stats have just been awesome, but how many times are the Rangers going to rely on this? Meaning Quick coming in and coming back to a rebound game. I do think that the Rangers were due for a wake up call, especially these last few games. Even though you talk about the lack of just like quality chances and even a little sloppy in Nashville against the Sharks, the Rangers were due for a little bit of a wake up call. But we're not entering a full on slump. And again, beating a quality team, Kings are one of the best teams in the league, whether you want to admit it or not. That just puts us right back on the path. And again, you got to keep it up because you look forward, you can't really analyze it through this way of looking at it. But what made the Rangers so effective, especially in that game they beat Carolina earlier in the year, you mentioned that the Rangers are kind of lacking a little bit in the speed department in these last few games. Yeah, they have. And again, who's going to beat you the best at that? Carolina and New Jersey. But also they're slumping too. So you can't really view it from that viewpoint. But I think if we could the way we play the Laviolette, if we run things 100% the way we want to run things, that could counteract what New Jersey has and what Carolina has in terms of speed. It sucks that we're not going to play them now until way on in 2024, but I think it's been pretty good so far. And Johnny Quick's been outstanding, man, really turning back the clock.
Now, to clip the game, I'll keep it on my phone while at the Garden, just to clip the videos of the goals and stuff to post them. But so I don't get to like I don't watch MSG Network's production of the game. I'm able to. It's funny. I can hear Sam, so that's fun. But otherwise, like I don't get the some of the nuggets that they find in stats. I saw, and I'm not sure if this is 100% true. I couldn't really find it online. Jonathan Quick has the longest streak. This was on the game the other night. The longest points streak of a goaltender in Ranger history. He's 8-0-1. So that means he has a 9-game stretch where in all of his starts, I don't know if that's to start the season like Panarin's point streak was. Like it's not the longest point streak in club history. It was the longest point streak to start a season. It might have been the start of the season, but the fact that Jonathan Quick at 37 years old, he was like the stud in LA, right? The star, among the stars in Hollywood, and then he goes to Vegas, they win, but he's kind of in like a tertiary role. Like I didn't think he was going to come in and be a not only reliable backup, but at this point, like William Jennings trophy level of tandem between him and Shesterkin. Stevo, I got questions later for you on that, but there is one thing I'd like to point out also from that Kings game. Biggest takeaway: Jimmy Vesey, Barkley Goodrow, who had like today the report was that he had like a piece of his mouth come out and that's why he wasn't in the game and he's on a liquid diet for a month. Like it wasn't a tooth, it was like a chunk of him
Huh.
from when the puck it disgusting. So he plays against LA and the VC Goodrow Benino line shuts down Kopitar, Byfield, Kempe. They also played against Marchand and Pasternak against Boston when they defeated them at home a few weeks back. And on the road, they played against Jack Hughes' line. Peter Laviolette believes that line has identity. They do have an identity. And now he's having them skate against top lines. Now we're recording this before the Leafs game. Based on Johnny took a photo and sent it in and was like, Lavi's talking to the fourth line. I have a feeling if maybe they won't play every shift, but they'll play shifts against the Matthews line tonight. And or I guess at this point, if you're listening, they will have had played them. I'm really impressed with the fact that he relies on the fourth line in that respect. And I think it's a takeaway we've slept on is that he's playing our fourth line against the best players in the entire NHL. Like we're talking the LA Kings were 11-0-1 on the road coming into that game, and he trusted VC Bonino and Goodrow to shut them down, and they did. And they did against Boston, and they did against New Jersey.
Yeah, and that just goes to show you how much we trust in bringing them up for in tough situations. You also got to give credit to this defense, Chives. I mean, the Rangers gave up 10 goals in both Washington and Ottawa.
Oh,
So they defense really needed a rebound game, and you got it right off the bat in the first period, given delivering a scoreless first period, which I thought was so important. And listen, I don't want to say it's true or admit it, but this defense plays. There's a noticeable difference the way this defense plays behind Shesterkin and when this defense plays behind Quick. Do you have any explanation to that or any reason why that might be? Because I see it and I think all Ranger fans do. I mean, it's just Quick's in there. It's just a different defense, man.
you want my advanced analysis, Steve-O?
Honest take. Let's hear.
It's the Henrik Lundqvist effect. I
Oh,
think that we saw this in Lundqvist's entire career. I don't think I don't think the players actively go on the ice. They're professional, right? Like I don't think it's in the sense of they know Shesterkin's in and they think they could be lazy and like, oh, he'll save it. Like that's a very like below spring league type of mentality. I think it is noticeable though, like thinking about breakaway opportunities. Shesterkin's already faced a penalty shot. They given up a shorthanded goal in Nashville where it was like a streaking in breakaway. The only time I can recall with Jonathan Quick, there was like a lazy fast break was the Duclair goal against San Jose, where it was like no one was even close to Duclair. But other than that, like I'm not putting Quick down. I'm not putting the team in front of Shesterkin down, but it is noticeable, right? Like to the eye, it's noticeable. And it seems that when a backup goaltender is in, and the Rangers have had now with both of their Vezina level, a Hall of Fame goaltender, and a goaltender that has that DNA in him to become that. It's funny because they seem to give up those opportunities. There's no specific small things, but it's the details in the game where like there's giveaways and just things that occur in front of Shesterkin that I do think it might be second nature, but there just might be a little bit of small details that if a game opens up, it's like, well, we trust in Shesterkin. And I think that obviously they do in Quick too, because Quick is playing like a starter right now. But at the same time, I think he gives Shesterkin some time. He might be dealing with a little bit. And I'd if again you're gonna pick and choose, all right, it's December. But I do have to say, Steve-O, Laviolette apparently at the morning skate today said that it was the team in front of both goaltenders. But it is interesting because you bring up that point, and I don't think one thing points to it, but it's details in the game, like small things, stick lifts, things of that nature that just like they seem to happen in front of Shesterkin or in Columbus that happened. In Ottawa, like those were blatant times where it was like they were giving up goals in bunches. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Quick was in that though against San Jose and they gave up 5. But I do think it happens more frequently with Shesterkin, and I don't think there's really any data or analysis that goes really far to say it. And obviously, no one's coming out from the locker room, right, and saying like, "Yeah, but we knew we had Chesterkin," and like that's not happening either. It may be subconscious. That's what I would say.
yeah, I want to go back to you mentioned Laviolette. I think you gotta give him a little bit credit for this last game against the Kings. When you're facing a Kings team that entered the game, I think number one in the league in goal differential, 5 on 5. I mean, fantastic. One of the best teams in the league. Rangers tighten up their game considerably high, especially on defense. They limited mistakes. Prioritize their own end of the ice, playing really well. And again, they just eliminating any high danger scoring chances. I think Quick only had 11 or 12 saves at the end of two periods. So I think that's kind of the edge that the Rangers had in the first month of the season and why they were so successful, Chives. So just getting back to what this team is all about and kind of their identity and how they like to play the game, and making that adjustment, knowing what the opponent is good at and switching it up and wiping what Saturday's game out of their head, because that was honestly disappointing. I'm sure nobody wants to go back and talk about that game. We'll put that one away. But again, limiting mistakes, just limiting the quality chances that LA had over the first two periods, and really setting them up for success in the third period. And you had some of the guys that you really don't expect to step up here, like a Will Cooley. Love to see that. All positives there. Take it and you move on to the next one. Overall, I don't want to call it a game that was a must win, but it was a game that I think you definitely kind of had to take to keep up in that conversation for being one of the best teams in the league for sure.
Yeah, I think some cool tidbit on the Will Cooley goal too. Vincent Trocheck assists that. They played on a line together to open the season when Trocheck was down the third line. By the way, he's been probably, I would argue, Trocheck's probably been one of the most if not the most valuable New York Ranger this season. But Will Cooley scores. Will Cooley, 21 years old, Toronto native. He's had to live with billet families before, but at 21, right, our age, he's living with the Trochecks. Wrote a piece on him. It all, for whatever reason, like the fans love the info that comes out about that. And when I've had the chance to talk to both of them about it, it's a cool moment that Trocheck assisted on Cooley's goal. And like Will Cooley lives with Vincent Trocheck right now and his family. Like they take care of him. It's like a billet family. So that was a cool moment. Something that happened today. Speaking of the defense, we're bouncing around a little. Just want to throw that little tidbit in. Keandre Miller out for personal reasons. They lost Kako, LTIR. Adam Fox was on the LTIR. Filipino was added to the LTIR retrospectively with a suspected concussion. Now Keandre Miller out, personal reasons. He's vital to the defense. He's a top four skater. Steve, what are your thoughts?
It's tough. I'm going to give you two stands on this. But number one, personal reasons. That could be one of a million different things. I mean, there's obviously no point speculating that, and quite frankly, unless it's anything that's going to keep him more than a week, we're never going to find out. But I think this team has got to take the approach that it has up to this point in the season. Obviously, again, and it's kind of that next man up, no quit mentality. You saw that when Adam Fox went down. You saw that when Phil Hito went down. And quite frankly, I think the team kind of played better with Fox out of the lineup. For sure, Fox comes back a little sloppy, and again, has nothing to do with Fox being in there. But again, it's more of that next man up mentality. Fox goes down, you see Gustafson step up. Now we kind of see Miller go down. You see Jones step up. I think it's kind of that next man up mentality, and this team has really played. I don't want to say met the expectation, but this team has played really well when, especially the top dogs, are not in the lineup. So I don't anticipate Keandre Miller being out more than, I would say he's probably back in there on Friday, unless this is something that's major, which I don't think it will be. But I don't know, so we'll see. But even if he's out for two games, I don't think it's make or break. Against we all know the Leafs bringing on offense. Maybe these last few games they even hit a little bit of a road bump. But again, if we could get back to that kind of tight and contested defense that we played against the Kings, we just well against opponents. I think we would be fine, especially moving on. You want to make sure you have Miller back for the game against Boston.
Yeah, looking ahead for sure. I mean, maybe when this drops, there'll be more information. But Keandre Miller, obviously paired with Jacob Truba, that is a hit, especially for how well Truba's playing. Like you said, next man up's been working phenomenally for the New York Rangers overall. Like you said, Jonny Brodzinski scores on the power play, like power play goal, hot broad. Okay, we'll take that. You have the depth is chipping in every game. Gustafson, like you said, I thought the defense played really well without Adam Fox, which is a crazy statement to say. 2021 Norris Trophy winner. So Keandre Miller goes down. They're trying to keep pace because the Metro this year is good, but not what anyone expected. Philadelphia Flyers, Washington Capitals in the mix with New York Islanders. So, Steve, what are your takes on the Metro right now?
It's definitely surprising up to this point. Obviously you would have thought that New Jersey would have been up there a little bit higher. Carolina also would have been a little bit higher. You would have figured, but Carolina's played more games than we have, and they've kind of hit a road bump there. Same with the Devils. Devils have hit a massive road bump, and these are two teams that really have not been playing up to their potential. I'll throw another one in there, Pittsburgh too. A lot of I thought Pittsburgh's last year, their last month and a half, that they really sucked. That really cut them out of the playoffs last year. I thought that was a fluke, and I thought this team would come back, they would rebound, and to start the season, that really has not been the case. They've
Mm-hmm.
also really have not been playing up to potential. And partly, mainly a good reason for that is you got teams like the Capitals coming out. Capitals had some big wins. They beat the Devils, they beat the Islanders, and you see they're surging up in the standings. The Flyers are tough. It seems to be like the last like 2 years they've been in this position after the first 2 months in the season, and you really can't tell if this team or recently you really can't tell if this team is a team that they're in this thing and you can't eliminate them, or if the new year comes and before you know it, they're back down there in the standings with Columbus. Columbus, you knew that they have hard times hanging in there. Injuries plague them, and they just get trumped, and they're on the bottom. So it's kind of tough. And then the Islanders, I thought you told me they would be in second, I wouldn't be surprised, but I didn't really see them as a second team. I saw them more as a third, fourth, fifth team in the Metro for sure. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. It just goes to show you that it's wide open. Obviously, we have the cushion at the top, but you go and you slump 2 games, and we'll talk about it in a second. But the schedule at the end of the year does not allow the Rangers much breathing room. When it comes down to the wire. So it's tough. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Metro.
It's obviously crazy, but I do think something that, speaking of playoff implications, that I'm more keeping an eye on is how are the teams like Tampa Bay playing in a position where they're fighting for a wild card? Because to me, the Rangers, if they're able to keep in first or second in the division, which from what it looks like, they likely will, um, even if they drop to third or whatever, if you're in those first two positions, like you're playing a wild card team, right? Or if you're in first in the division. So, or if you're in second, now you're playing a third team, and right now that third team, I believe, is Washington or Philadelphia. So it's like you're playing kind of these sleeper teams, and that could be dangerous for the Rangers because I think last season it was a buildup. It seemed like they were playing New Jersey for 3 months. It got boring to talk about, and then it was there, it was intense, and it was over, and it was an ugly ending. This year, to me, feels like whatever team they might draw in the postseason, they have to be ready to play playoff hockey. And that's what all the conversations have been this year with the team and the team meetings. It's not about direct results. It's when we're encountering this situation, how are we going to approach it? And I think that matters because right now, with the way the Metro is shaping up, there's teams that you're not suspecting, and those are the most dangerous teams to me.
Really? So like Philadelphia.
You know what, Philly? We talked about this. Like the Rangers, when they rebuilt in 2018, they were pretty good, and then they got to January and they dropped one game in Arizona, like 7-0, and just from that point on, off the rails. Like they were terrible. So I can't tell with Philly if this is going to be like that it carries them through. Are they going to keep pace or slow down a little bit, but still make the playoffs and just kind of stink in the playoffs? Um, but even if it's not a team like Philly, we're talking Florida Panthers doing pretty well. Toronto Maple Leafs doing pretty well. Tampa Bay Lightning doing pretty well. But they flirted with the wild card. The Islanders are on a tear right now. I think they won 8 in their last 12 or something, or like in their last 10. But is that a team that if they start dropping games, they're fighting for a wild card? That's a dangerous team to me, Steve. That's a dangerous team to me. A team that comes in, Tampa Bay Lightning. In I'm looking at for I'm writing a piece on the Rangers statistics that jump out. I'm not an advanced stats guy, but the start of the season, if you ask at any point, forwards, block shots, forwards, hits, Tampa's involved in all that. And that's what bred Barclay Goodrow, a player that came over from San Jose, had those intangibles, won 2 Stanley Cups with Tampa, boosted his stock up, and then now he's playing for New York, playing that same brand. That's a team to me that's a sleeper and is dangerous. Nikita Kucherov leads the league in points, and he's on a team right now that's in the wild card. I mean, it doesn't get more dangerous than that. And I'm not saying specific teams, but I hear you. I do want to talk about Philly, though, because you brought this up to me. What are your thoughts? Is a team like Philly, do you keep in pace? Do Carolina, New Jersey surge back? Or is this something where it's like New Jersey is going to be challenged all season because they won playoff series last year? Every team's going to get up to play them. Or is this something that right now it's like they didn't have Timo, they didn't have Nico, and now that they have all their guys, they'll get into position and get back into like that first, second spot in the division?
For me, I think it's going to be hard for the Flyers to keep pace. And that's just my opinion. They just like us, they're going to have a tougher second half of of the season in terms of schedules. I think a lot of games against the Devils and the Islanders and the Hurricanes might do them in.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me personally, and you got to think that the Devils and the Hurricanes find that spark and jump up. And again, I'm not really done on Pittsburgh either. I really don't think this team is playing. I mean, they have the dogs, Jake Gensel and Crosby. I mean, they got a really good team down there. And at some point, you think the motor's got to flip and they turn on.
So you're
They,
taking the brand avenue. You're saying Eric Carlson, Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, they'll be fine. That's
Yeah, and listen, I'm after Eric Carlson's like really fluky year a year ago. I'm not as big on him as a lot of people were, but I think he's still enough in the system. Again, I'm a big system kind of guy, and you've plugged him in there, it's gonna operate himself. So I think it's only a matter of time before Pittsburgh wakes up, and
yeah,
you
he's
gotta look.
not the guy, right? Like
No,
he
he's not
used
the
to be
guy.
the
No,
guy. He's not the guy like he was in Ottawa.
he's
But
not the
imagine
guy.
like it's like this is weird to say, but imagine like Adam Fox at 37. You're like, well, I'll take him.
Yeah, I guess so, but he's not the guy, and I do agree with you, but he's enough of a guy to fit the system and still be a contribuable piece to that defense. I mean, they still have a good defense there. I just they haven't played up to potential. Um, and
Mhm.
you got to take a look at the things that have really haunted some of these teams like Carolina, New Jersey, and it's been goaltending, man. Goaltending has not been good. The defense too of these teams. I mean, I don't
Well,
think.
Carolina kind of it hasn't been beneficial, but they were banking on Frederick Anderson, and he had like a blood clot. So that's like one of those like you can't control. Should they have maybe Ronta's actually played pretty shaky, and we speak about Jonathan Quick, Ronta, former Benny Allaire product. He was really good for them when the Rangers played them in the postseason, and he had to step in. So yeah, Carolina definitely in a little bit of a different situation, but I'll agree with Pittsburgh and New Jersey. I don't think their goaltending department's very good to begin with.
Yeah, you look at it. I mean, Vanacek and Schmidt, they have not been that good, you know. And
No.
this team, and going back to the Christie episode, I knew, and we talked about what is their biggest issue, and it seems going into the season that it was going to be goaltending, and it really. I don't think the Devils are in like Oilers terms of desperation in terms of goaltending, but I mean, if the Devils go on the next month here and they really struggle, I mean, it's going to be a big issue, and of course they've gotten hit with the injuries. Injuries has
Yeah.
not helped the Devils, and compare that to a team like the Islanders. I think the Islanders are a much more interesting place because they found ways to win the tough games. You
So did
know,
the Rangers.
exactly.
That's the one thing with this Ranger team. Hail to the man upstairs. Like we talked about next man up before. They found a way. And that's the one reason I will not give New Jersey the benefit of the doubt. Yes, you were down Timo. He hasn't been that good since he's been there. And I don't have stats like I could pull him up, but just for the sake of the flow of the conversation here, he hasn't been great. Nico is down. He is a great player, but at the same time, like Selke type, okay, the Rangers were down Adam Fox, who actually won the Norris Trophy. You're down Dougie Hamilton, who had a pretty good resurge type year last year. I don't think Dougie is Adam Fox. So that's my take on that. But I do agree, actually. I like that you brought up the Islanders in that conversation too, because they had a lot go on. They've had Stefan Rossner, the hockey news reporter for the Islanders. I feel like every day I open my phone, he's reporting that there's an injury. There's a guy that had to be called up. There's a trade because this guy was injured and now this guy is not in the lineup. So the Islanders have balanced a lot, and they're another one of those teams that like they made the playoffs last year, and without Bo Horvat for a full season.
Yes, yeah, and they picking guys off waivers coming in with the injuries. I think they've handled adversity really well this season, Chives, and you gotta figure at some point they're gonna keep it up. I do want to go back to Penguins for a second. I mean, this is a team that I think is better than their record, and teams like that kind of should scare you in a sense. I think when the Penguins are on top of their game, they're a top two team in this division. But when the Penguins are not on top of their team, we'll call them the bad Penguins. The bad Penguins are a bottom two team, Chives.
Bizarro Penguins.
Yes.
By the
And
way, fun fact: all sports news put up. I like they put up every day there, like in this day in history. Mike Sullivan was hired 9 years ago today.
wow, that's interesting. Well, he's a when you have a coach like that, I mean, it gotta click like that at some point. Um,
You think it's a little over the hill though for them? They usually I'm good with comparing like different teams from different sports. The Penguins to me feel a little brand though, and we're going to disagree on this, and I think until the season's over. Their team, we talk about it. Me and you've been on this now, like you mentioned. We've been recording Puck Talk since 15-16. We've been talking about since then. The Penguins are a team. They get hot at the end of the year, but they have not won a playoff series since 2018. So, what convinces you that they're better than their record?
well, listen, I'll start right at goaltending. I mean, Jari has elevated his play. I mean, he's got one of the best save percentages in the league, and he's had a recent surge. And this team, when this team dials in and locks in and they score, Crosby's still scoring goals at a good pace. When this team scores, I mean, they're tough to beat. But the problem is when they don't score, then they're going to have to rely on defense more. They're going to have to rely on Jari. And again, Jari's been pretty good this season, or at least
I don't
recently he's
think
been.
I actually don't think they scored a power play goal in the month of November, too.
Yeah,
And like
and
the beginning of the season was kind of like that NFL training camp mentality where people were like, "Oh, Eric Carlson, Letang, Malkin, Crosby, Gensel, like or Rust, like that power play videos were coming out of their training camp, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, the league's like no one's going to survive." And you go 2 months in advance, and the whole month of November they don't record a power play goal. That's huge too. Special teams.
of course. And again, it's not like they're lacking any dogs in that department. I mean, they got a great power play for sure. I mean, you want to sit here and round out who they got rolling out there. I mean, there's no doubt that they got some dogs on there. Jake Gensel, I'm a big Jake
Dogs, but
Gensel
they're not
guy.
performing.
That's true, but again, I still think that they're gonna pick it up. I mean, that might just be
I
me,
hear
but
you. Because like
I
with
think
the Rangers
honestly,
power play, like
man.
if they went on a slump, are we really sitting here and saying like, listen, that's a bad slump, bro. 4 weeks is bad. But if the Rangers were in that same situation, you kind of have faith, which I want to bring up a name to you, Mika Zibanejad. Does he feel the same way? Now, this is a little bit of a stretch, but as the power play for the Penguins, he has 7 goals this season. He's fourth on the team in goals. And normally in the past, he puts up 15 to 20 on the power play. Last season was, I believe, his career high with 20. He only has 3 power play goals this year from that one-time spot. Is Mika Zibanejad, like, do you have faith that he'll bounce back if we're going by that kind of a feeling, the way Steve-O views the game? Is the Penguins to you like that OBJ, like, oh, we'll plug him in the lineup and we got faith in him and we can do anything because we're the Rams and Sean McVay, or the 49ers with Chase Young and McCaffrey? Or is it more like, how you view Zibanejad, where it's like, oh, he hasn't really heated up yet, and that's how he's playing right now?
Interesting. I have not thought of that comparison, comparing Zibanejad to the Penguins power play. But uh listen, I think Zibanejad has more pieces around him that are contributing. When you take a look at the Penguins not scoring a power play goal in the month of November, that's not, you don't point to one guy and say, you know what, that Jake Gensel, he's the problem. It's a whole team effort. The reason why the
Mhm,
Rangers are one of the best teams in the league, um, best team in the conference, is mainly because well, Zibanejad, yeah, he could struggle, but he could go kind of on the radar because other guys have kind of stepped in and filled that void. You have Panarin, you have Lafreniere, you have Johnny Quick coming in, sealing shutout wins. So yeah, again, he's Zibanejad has more around him that kind of pushes that lower under the radar, and the Penguins really struck out that entire month of November. But I think in a sense, yeah, I guess you could compare them. I hope Zibanejad doesn't go a month without scoring a power play, without recording a power play point. But I think the Penguins are going to rebound, and they, not to say that they have a easier portion of their schedule coming up. I know that they play the Coyotes and the Canadians within like the next week. So they're gonna play some I don't want to call them lower tier teams, but they're gonna play some teams that they could really tear off on. And to me, the Penguins could easily give you a 5, 6, 7 goal performance. And to me, that's what they need. They need to get back on track, and they need to find their footing. And the pieces are there. I will tell you that though, Chaz, I am more confident in Carolina and New Jersey climbing up than I would be with the Penguins. I think Carolina for sure, they got to find their footing at some point, and the Devils too a little bit. I don't think this Devils team is on par. I think it's obvious that the Devils are not on the same level that they were last year for sure. And how about this? I think it's as simple as this. If if the top six aren't going to step up and really tee off on given nights, I think whoever finds their footing and plays the better goaltending, either Carolina or New Jersey, is going to be the team that rises up in the standings.
Steve-O, I got Mark Messier, Mark Messier, number 11, right behind me. I believe he was the last Hart Trophy winner for the New York Rangers. I want to say it was 90, maybe 91, his first year as a Ranger. Do you think Artemi Panarin is not only MVP caliber, but the shoe-in Hart Trophy favorite?
Good question. Yeah, for sure. You got to keep him in that conversation for sure from what he's done. And a lot of it's going to come down to how he plays in the second half of the season. As of right now, I don't like I don't like saying yes he is, because then he'll come out and then have a given my luck, he'll come out and have a 10 game pointless streak.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think for sure he's got to be in that conversation. I mean, comparing him to not the number 11, that's a tough task, but um it, it it's gonna be interesting to see when it comes to Panarin. How about this? I'll give you a different answer. um Panarin is going to be interesting to see because let's say guys like Mika and other guys in the lineup, I wouldn't want to say Blake Wheeler, but guys like Kreider and Zibanejad are not able to come back into form. Is Panarin still able to carry that workload and remain in this top conversation? I think that's a big question because as much as Panarin's been great and he's been fantastic, I don't want to have to rely on him especially in the second half of the season, especially when we play those tough games of back to back. We got to play Washington, Carolina, New Jersey, the Islanders. Then we got to play Philly, and if they're a team that's still in the mix, throw in the Penguins. We got a couple games against them. I don't want to have to rely on one single guy. And again, you kind of see that with the Penguins. At end of games, they're just throwing the puck to Crosby, and they're not generating any offense. Relying on one guy just doesn't work out. Again, I think you've said this before. Hockey's a game where you get a guy going and he's hot. Yes, it's gonna be tough to control him. But again, I don't want to be a team that relies on one guy. I mean, we have
Mhm.
so many pieces around us. And I want to see, we're not there yet. There's a lot of pieces that I still think you throw in that's advantage at. You throw and you want to be able to see a little bit more from Kreider. How about the fourth line? You mentioned them. They could really bring an impact to games. I mean, I don't want to rely on one guy.
I think this season is going to have two narratives. So I'm going to play clairvoyant here, Steve-O. And based on what you're saying with Panarin, it's something I've seesawed on for a little while. The Rangers are either going to be a team that the fourth line plays well, Panarin, Lafreniere, Trocheck play well, and the first and third line don't really figure out an identity, and they will only go deep in the playoffs for as far as their defense against the rush. Igor Shesterkin, the second line and fourth line will take them. Or those players that have been quiet for the first half, first quarter, will heat up. Mika Zibanejad maybe comes close, has some shades of a 91-point season like he had last year. Chris Kreider, maybe a shades of that 2021-22 season of 52 goals. And they become a juggernaut team where it's difficult to shut down anybody, and that makes them a Stanley Cup favorite. And I'm hearing both sides of that, the flip of the coin. And I'm having a hard time really deciding what I think. Is this a Stanley Cup contending team? Some nights, 100%. And I'm not going to say other nights on the few losses they've had, but there are nights where I look and I say, if a team finds a way to defend Panarin and Lafreniere in layers, or eliminate their rush play, or eliminate Lafreniere from carrying through the neutral zone, and from now forcing Panarin to carry through the neutral zone, maybe Vincent Trocheck's a little bit colder. Zibanejad doesn't really, as you mentioned in your words, return to form. Chris Kreider doesn't really return to form now. It's the postseason. We know Kreider turns up in the playoffs. We know Zibanejad has that capability too. But in the case that they play a team like the Islanders, maybe the Flyers are that wild card team. I know there's a different level of engagement, responsibility, and accountability in the playoffs, but I do find that narrative might spin off, and it could be ugly if a player like Panarin shut down. So as much as I enjoy the conversation because he is a Hart candidate, and if not, he's top five, at least in the NHL right now. I do question, is that kind of glazing over some of the small things? And we talked about it last episode. I don't want to bring a negative air here, but we talked about Blake Wheeler, right? He struggled. He didn't turn that around against LA. And I think that's what you see is what you get with him. But I want to ask you, Steve-O, do you see this team as a bona fide cup contender? Or is this a team that, if certain adjustments are made by the opponent, can be shut down? And granted, that's the case for every team. We saw that with Boston last year. But I'm saying, like, shut down, like they lose four straight, like they did in 22 in the conference final. Versus if they get shut, maybe not shut down, but if they lose game 7 overtime, like the Bruins did, all right, they had a hell of a season, and the opponent really turned up and had some magical moments.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. You take a look at it for sure. Obviously, I think it's established that this is a cup contending team, considering the fact that we're first in the Metro. And again, we got a 5-6 point lead on the next team up, which is the Islanders. But this is definitely a team that can get shut out. And I don't when I watch every night, Chives, I don't want to be shut out because all it takes is for one team to exploit how we shut Panarin down, how we shut Lafreniere down, and then it's going to take a team like Carolina or New Jersey to jump on it. And when we play them 3 or 5 more times in the season, they're going to act upon it. And these are teams that could really neutralize our guys. And when our guys get neutralized, I tell you what, Chives, we look lifeless. I mean, you throw a couple games in there, like Senators for sure. I mean, that first Nashville game earlier on in the season, first 2 weeks of the season. I mean,
Mhm.
we really do look lifeless when we are shut down. So when I watch every night, I'm watching to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Like,
As
how
a
much
fan.
does the Rangers controlling play affect if they get shut down? Because something I noticed too, Johnny and I talked about this in the presser, but I want to talk about this on the mic extensively with my main man, Steve O. The Rangers employed a 1-3-1 against Arizona, and I actually didn't act upon it quick enough. I wanted to take a photo of it because it was so discreet that they want to force you to turn the puck over and capitalize on your mistake. And since then, I think that's what we mean by lost their way. And part of that, I think, has to do with control of the game. The Rangers, I think, if they control the game, they'll win the hockey game. But if they don't, they've gotten away from finding a way to turn the game in their favor. And I think that's what happened against Washington. I think that's what happened against Ottawa. And granted, they're very small sample sizes. And it doesn't take away from the positivity of how well Panarin's playing. How well, I mean, they're getting scoring from everyone. The fourth line. I mean, we're talking guys that have played 500 games in the NHL as role players are like becoming scorers on this team or contributing game winners. Jimmy Vesey has three of them.
He's been awesome, by
Injuries
the
has
way.
not been a problem, man. But again, I'm sorry, I got on a little bit of a tangent, but I agree. If the Rangers control play, I feel like that's where they succeed, and when they don't, I feel like they've had a little bit of a difficult time turning that tide. Nashville was a good example that they had, but otherwise, I don't think there's a lot of examples this season that point to that. So
I agree with that point for sure. It also depends who you're playing and who turns it around and gets hot at the right time. I don't know. Maybe the Rangers play Carolina in the playoffs, and Carolina, you know what? They weren't playing good defense and had good goaltending, but now, come April, they turned it around, and they, so uh, it's tough to say.
you have to ask questions when a team is this good because I think it's important to report and highlight the aspects of a team, not in a negative way, but to point out things that could change outcomes. Zach Jones is now back in the lineup. I don't have stats in front of me again, like it could sit here and type them up and waste more time, more of our listeners' time. But at the end of the day, I do question like when Zach Jones is now in the lineup, how many wins have they? How many games have they won with Zach Jones in the lineup? I'm curious about things of that nature. It comes to mind because Keandre Miller is a major part of the team. How many guys that are important are going to go down before it could be the tipping point? Those are valuable questions. And I think for the positivity and the fact that they've only lost literally count on your hands games, really one hand and maybe a few fingers, they there are still things that can lead to skids. And we're seeing where that became evident in the last week or so.
Yeah. I got a question for you. How about this? Rangers got two back-to-back games coming up this weekend. They got one against the Ducks, and they got a tough one coming up, a rematch against the Bruins. And they've been waiting for this one after the result of the last one. Who do you play in net? Jonathan Quick or Shesterkin?
Against oh, I see. Shesterkin starting against Toronto, barring anything happens in the next few hours. With that, the, first of all, by the way, I we we have a special guest lined up for the next Leaf game because I love the Maple Leafs. I love talking about them. I love the drama around them. So I wish we could talk about that and how that might have to do with the goaltending choice for obviously Friday. Barring how the game goes, though, I really think Lavi's gone with Quick in some big games, and that's a really valuable question because it's like, uh, is it something that the decision is they want Chesterton to feel a little more comfortable before going into the game like that? I don't know if that's the case. I really think you start Quick against Anaheim and you start Chesterton against Boston in Boston because you want your starter in net, right? But Jonathan Quick was in net when they topped the Bruins to become the best team in the NHL at that point in the season, 3 weeks back. So I think there comes a point where if I'm I'm Peter Laviolette and I'm standing at the podium, I am telling you that Saturday against Boston, there Shesterkin is starting. But I'm not Peter Laviolette standing at the podium. So I don't know. And whatever decision comes about, there's going to be positives and negatives to that decision that might affect the game. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, there's got to be a time where you say, we're playing Shesterkin against the other best team in the conference.
I agree with you. I 100% agree with
Evo
you.
agrees. I love that. I love that.
And here's the reasoning. Shesty is the best card that we have in our deck. Why are we not throwing him out there in games that matter the most?
Like
And
in
again,
his
up to this point, he has not been the best. He's not been the best.
Mhm.
He's the best card in the deck, but he hasn't been pulling out the wins when we needed to. And again, you've seen the performance. That Washington game was a doozy. And Quick's been, I think a lot of it does have to play. A little bit of the decision does play into what happens in this Leafs game. If we get trumped by the Leafs, then yeah, you know what? You might want to roll out Shesty next game, get a rebound game in against the Ducks, and throw Quick back out there because Quick kind of seems more of a short term solution. But again, it's only a matter of time before I think we see Quick's elements from the last 2 years that we've seen. So a little bit seeping in there with in the Sharks game. But
I
again, you
think that
can't.
was actually the defense in front of him. I'll say I have a lot of faith in Quick, but who are you starting game one of the playoffs?
It's gotta be
And I
Igor.
know
No
that's
question.
in months from now, but I think that's what you're saying too, right? Is like he is a weapon for you, and he might not be at his best right now, but like you're saying, it's like listen, there's situations going on with this Rangers team that are unforeseen and they're winning, but there is something unsettling thinking that Gustafson and Quick have performed better, and that's the truth. I mean, this is the truth. I'm speaking the truth on the mic. Than I think Adam Fox and Igor Shesterkin have this season because those are your two award winners on the team. Like they were named at a point in their career at 20, maybe they're both 25, 26, the best defender in the NHL in the world's best hockey league and the best goaltender in the world. They were named that in the last 2 seasons. So or 3 seasons. So with that, like you're saying, it's like he is the best. I like that. He's like your ace, right? But like how many times are Steve, this is my question. You said give him a bounce back if he gets pulled against Toronto, right? Which I don't know if you will or not, but even so, even if he needs another game under his belt, you're gonna play him against Anaheim?
If if he struggles, I am because
Yep.
it's the next opportunity. I want him to get out there, and to me, it's more important that he gets this for his confidence level. That he gets a rebound game under his belt, and there's a good chance, even though Anaheim's picked up the pace here, good chance of that happening. And I like that matchup better, and we'll address that question. There'll be tons of other games, even though playing it doesn't get any bigger. I think, in my opinion, than playing in Boston, the team that's second best in the conference or best in the conference that's going
Yeah.
to be going up against us. So I think there's no better testament to that, but it all depends. To me, I would, if I'm Laviolette, I would play. I would specify this to what's going on with Igor's situation, trying to get his confidence up in a rebound game instead of if he let's say he does blow, which I don't think he will, but let's say he blows it up and you sit him the next game and then you bring him back into Boston. I think it's kind of a tough thing to do. It's kind of a tough thing to do for a, a, a number one goaltender in the league that again has not played up to expectations. Hasn't played terrible, but again hasn't. And we've seen this as a testament to Igor's game. He has these streaks. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I mean, you go back to the playoffs against Pittsburgh, on the
Yeah.
road. The Igor, he just couldn't get it on the road. I don't know what it is, but it'll be interesting to see in the coming days for sure. But again, hypothetical situation, you love to have Igor out against the Bruins.
I don't think enough people have talked about the goaltending in New York. And I think it's because, again, the team's winning.
Hmm.
I like that we talked about that. Something else. How important to you are Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider? Like, we know it's important, but is if they don't warm up, and granted, they get long time till the playoffs, but they don't warm up. Like, I personally think they were what carried the Rangers through the playoffs in 2022. One of three Stanley Cup runs in the last now more than a decade was because of how they played. When the Rangers needed something, they delivered. And it's funny because now it seems like the opposite. It seems like Panarin is that guy. When he was out of the big three forwards, he was the guy that everyone was questioning what was going on. He didn't step up all the way. That's something I'm fearing out of Crowder and Zibanejad right now. I just feel they haven't been Broadway Joe for the Rangers.
Yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, there's no reason to sugarcoat it. They've not been explosive. And again,
Mhm,
I was going to bring up that the playoffs 2 years ago when we went to the conference finals. What did we have in common with that? And Zibanejad and Kreider, they are a 1-2 punch.
mhm.
There's no. We could agree with that, right?
Oh, 100%. And I think this season it's weird because just to build on that, like Panarin and Loft seem to be like that this year, which is a good thing, but it would be a good thing if that was additional.
Exactly. Again, Panarin and Loft have been. I don't want to call them secondary, but again, they've had that connection this year, and Kreider and Zibanejad have not. And to me, Zibanejad and Kreider are the 1-2 punch. When you roll out and you have your 1-2 punch rolling, it's way easier for the secondary pieces to come in and contribute. And you're more likely to have an overall complete game. But when the 1-2 punch is not there, and you're relying on Panarin and Lafreniere, but oh no, tonight they're not on, it's just tougher. And you look at all the playoff wins that the Rangers have had, 95% of them have had not Panarin, Kreider and Zibanejad have the 1-2 punch on a roll, whether it's the power play, whether it's 5-on-5, whether it's late game dramatics. We've all seen that, so you want your 1-2 punch there. And again, I would also have to assume that at some point they gotta get something going.
Yeah.
Uh, but again, your 1-2 punch, you want them out there, and not only do you want them out there, you want to have full confidence in them. So we got a little bit more time. Again, I know we kind of
But
been
I said this to my dad the other night, Steve a little more time, only like 2.5 months until the trade deadline, which I know again, yeah, that's time, but it's for the right wing and their complementary piece, which is part of that conversation. Like, is Brodzinski playing there? Because then to shake things up, Lavi put Wheeler back up on the first line, and that's not working. Kako did not work. Brodzinski, I thought was working, and then to shake things up when the team was kind of slumping, he moved Brodzinski off that line. So it's like, listen, I like Brodzinski up there. I love the way Laviolette views him. He doesn't view him as just like a plug and play. Oh, we need him for this game, and then he's not an NHL guy. Like, I love the way he views him. He can be a late bloomer. Vince talked about this on his podcast. He was like, Kreider didn't hit 52 goals. Granted, that's not the same thing. But speaking of the approach, right? Like, okay, he's 30 years old. He might not be a top tier prospect, but like he could contribute. He could become that Frankie Vetrano type, Pavel Buchnevich type complimentary. Not to that level, but something that those two need. And it seems like players with those qualities, an edge, competitive, plays with some emotion, plays really hard. That's what Buchnevich and Frankie Vetrano had. That's what Brodzinski has. But the question is like, I don't think he catalyzes that line. He can only add to it. And I think that's what the problem's
exactly.
been. for Kreider and Zibanejad is that Kakko's not going to catalyze you. Wheeler's not going to catalyze them. They have to drive and they have to have a good complementary piece on their wing. And I feel like Brodzinski can be that guy, but I want to know your thoughts on that.
It could be. I touched. What do you call him? Hot Rod Johnny? Would you,
Hot Brod.
Hot Broad. Listen. Again, I don't think I can answer this question right now at this point. Again, to me, you're on this wave, and I'm not to say that I'm not on the wave, but again, when you throw them in there in games in December, the games that truly, I don't want to say they don't matter because every game matters, but again, the situation is not ride or die. Yeah, of course he
He's
come through
not
a
Kadarius Toney lining up off
lot.
sides. Like that's not the level of games the Rangers are playing in yet.
True. And listen, I don't think we have a Kadarius Tony on this team, thank goodness. But is this a player we want to trust in a cup aspiration season? Ride or die, we're playing Carolina. Do you trust Johnny B? And again, to me, I not to say that I don't, but I'm not fully confident in it. Again, we still got 2 months until a little bit more than 2 months of the trade
No,
deadline.
but you got to turn back the clock for me. Okay. It's January 2022, and the Rangers have just acquired Frank Vetrano. Nobody, he was not for that fourth rounder. He was not going to be playing on the first line. We knew that like at that time, like he's probably playing the third line. That was the initial reaction and the initial thought. So before that, I know that there were guys that were rotating in and out of that first line, but until that player proves themselves, it's kind of hard, I feel like, to have that view.
That's true, but to play devil's advocate on both sides here,
Okay.
Frankie V, the lines that he was playing on, the lines were popping and the offense was there.
But
To
once he
me,
started performing,
that's true. I don't think
Jonny
Vitron.
Brodzinski is like 5 points.
Yeah, listen, I'm not underestimating what he's done, but I'm saying that again.
You're the other angle. I know.
Exactly. Yes, and again, yeah. Let's roll him out there. Let's keep rolling him out there. He's been great. Why not? Let's see. Let's roll it out there until it
Are you
fails.
saying like it's game 6 of the cup final?
Not even the cup final. I'm just saying game 5 in the first round.
Okay.
Again, it's tough to have these conversations in December because I don't know. The trade deadline is going to really determine where this team is at, and the next two
With
months.
the friggin' pennies that Chris Drury's working with.
Yeah, but listen, I trust him. He really pulled a master class of the cap situation last year. So he did it once. I think he can do it again.
I know we dogged the whole Patrick Kane thing because like Fox, they're like lingering, they kept out for longer, and we only played with 4 defensemen. That was wild. I don't think enough people talk about that. But I will give him that. Like you gotta give him the credit for getting Kane and Tarasenko. He got both in 2 weeks. He got Patrick Kane and Tarasenko. Granted, it didn't fully work out. But that's where I understand what you're saying. You have to have faith in his ability to acquire assets. But again, they're working with like that. I don't think they could get a single guy. I don't even know if they could pull up like an Othman, bro. So that's where part of the Johnny B conversation I think is like you're not moving a guy. Who are you moving?
It's a good point, and also
Like you're not making a swap that's like Sammy Belay is part of the package for Tarasenko because you got to take on Tarasenko's contract too, or some of it right at that time. He's a piece I'd watch out for. He's a piece I'd watch out for. By the way, struggling Ottawa team, also another piece I'm going all over the place right now.
oh,
We
that's a hot
talked about
take.
the Penguins all effing episode. Brian Rust and Jake Gensel, keep your eyes out. I think if they can manipulate the cap, those are 2 guys that have playoff experience and would fit with Kreider's advantage at.
That's a hot take in itself. I like that. I want to digest that a little bit.
Okay.
First of all, the Penguins are not trading either one of those players to the New York Rangers. That's never happening.
You
As
know what
much
was
as I'd
funny? Someone
love
else
it,
said that to me. I think they would.
I don't think they would.
You know
It
what?
also
The
depends
Penguins
on where
might
they
be
are.
delusional enough to think they're a cup contender. You're right. But in like the next 2 years, because they keep doing that. But maybe they're finally are like, we need some assets. We need to draft somebody.
True, but I don't see that happening only because you look at it, how many years does Sidney Crosby have left? How many years do some of these players have left together? We a couple years ago we were thinking, oh, Malcolm Letang Crosby's gonna get blown up. This is it. And they said, you know what? These next 2 to 3
They
years,
ran him
that's
back.
it. This is our window. And this might be, once they turn the page off this generation, it may not look that great. So again, they
It's
don't
like the
have them.
Patriots.
Of course. So they might say, you know what? This is all we have. We're going to throw it in. I don't see them shifting. They'd have to be dead in the water in order for them, in my opinion, to trade Gensel and Rust.
I agree, but Steve-O, we're going back. Are they not pretty darn close to dead in the water? They got like through. Let's put it this way: they have a good month. They have until middle of January, or give it the All Star break. At that point, they'll have to figure out where they're sitting in the Metro. It's too competitive. I don't think they have a lot of time to make up ground.
It is, but they're only 5 points behind a wild card spot as of right now. Don't get me wrong; it is highly competitive. There's a lot of teams in front of them, but you win 2 games in a row. Or let's say you win 3 games in a row. That's cutting it in right there, So, and
All right. Well,
again,
the Chives list is Vlad, Rust, maybe Gensel, Zook,
listen, I
and
feel like you're
maybe
trying to
Steven
hype me up
Stamkos.
on Jay Gensel and Brian Rust. Those are. Drury would just be ascended to freaking S tier if he could
It's
pull
gonna
that
be the
off.
guy no one expects. Let's
And
put
go
it that way.
for it.
I think that's how it's gonna be because that's where they found success. I think Chris Drury looked at his cap situation and said, we may never get the chance to go for Kane and Vlad again. But Vincent Trocek is like the longest signed Ranger, if you can believe that.
Yep, he
I
is.
think Vincent Trocek might have the longest contract on the New York Rangers right now, if not Adam Fox and
I think
Zibanejad.
Adam Fox is one or two. Fox, Trocheck.
But the fact Trocek's in that conversation means they value him, right? And I understand like they weren't going to negotiate, but clearly term whatever. With that stated, I think they look and they say, we have these guys together for a little while. Like you just mentioned Malkin, dude, the guy's still going. I mean, Chris Kreider entered the league like 7 years after Crosby was in the league. So they got these guys for a little bit longer. The core is sticking together. Fox, Kreider's manager, Trojan. With that, I think Chris Drury looked down the pike and said, all right, let's try the all-stars. Let's try them. Let's bring in the star players. We'll see how it goes. Didn't work. Collection of stars. Okay. We want a team approach. We want a little more structure. Bring in Peter Laviolette. It's going to be, I think, like the first go around. And this is why players like Brodzinski and Jones have more of an opportunity because I think they're looking like our cap's a little hung up in our stars and the complimentary guys are doing well. The next man up is doing well. So why don't we just run with that? Why don't we run with a guy that we could trade a third rounder for? And I like that. Now, bringing up stars, contracts, this and that. Is there a point, though, where you question, like, we have some of these guys signed big money. We got to see him perform. Because we just talked about almost every single player, I think, on the roster this episode. We're really diving deep here. But if you're talking about trade targets, you have to acknowledge the guys that haven't been catalyzed or haven't been going.
Of course, I listen. It's easier said than done. I like it. Why not ride this out? It's working out. But yeah, of course, like I keep saying, it's gonna work in December. But again, do trust that come playoff times. And again, can't answer that question right now. I'm not like diffusing that your point, but again, I'm just bringing it up that come playoffs is a different animal. We all know that. We talk about that every year. So that, again, that's something that we'll have to address coming later on. So it'll be interesting. What was the second half of your question there?
The star players. I mean, we just talk about, like, now that I'm thinking, I can see cap friendly in my head. We talked about Adam Fox. I think he's heating up. He had 3 assists in Nashville, but Adam Fox hasn't, like, blown me away. I thought last year he had, like, 9 goals before the second half of the year. I was like, "Who like, this guy's just turning up a notch again." Again, I don't think it's ceiling. He dealt with a long-term injury for the first time in his entire hockey career. I asked him that when he returned. I was like, thinking in my head, porters are asking some questions. I'm like, I don't think I've ever heard he's been injured. So I'm like, Adam, like, have you ever been injured? Not once. In his entire hockey career has he been out long term. So that plays a factor into it. But Mika, again, I'm really hung up on that right now. Just for Truba, a lot of people say that contract wasn't warranted, but I think collectively, anybody with 2 eyes can see he's been one of the most valuable players. We haven't really talked much about him.
Yeah, I
Block
think he's
shots,
been great.
doing it right? Like, he's been great, but players that are earning high salaries, there is an expectation for them to play. And I'm actually on the complete other side of that conversation. I'm big on, like, why is money the conversation? But I think money becomes a conversation when we start talking about the trade deadline because it's like you you can't move anyone theoretically, but like if you move VC, like that's moving like a league minimum contract, a PTO based contract, basically. Um, like you're not moving a Nick Bonino, right? Like you're not moving those guys that are contributor and bottom sixers or things of that nature, and you're not moving your studs. So it's like they're pretty locked in money wise. Those guys gotta perform because I don't think you're bringing in much of a piece for Kreider and Zibanejad.
Yeah, you're not unless you subtract a piece out of the lineup, which I think in order to
It's just
clear
not
cap
happening.
space, and I don't see that happening either.
Yeah,
Um, I you mentioned star power. I want to go back to the yeah, you could say the failed acquisitions of Tarasenko and Kane. But if we go back to this point, or if we go back before the result of the playoffs, and how about this? As of right now, if you tell me if you had to go back, would you acquire Kane Tarasenko? 100% I would. Even though it
yeah,
didn't work out, I still would. I still would. And again, this year is going to be different, and I still think we need to do something. And we're gonna have to finesse, and there's probably gonna be nights where we're gonna be running
man.
out 4 defensemen in the same opportunity. But I still think this team, unless something happens, maybe what is a hot rod, Johnny? What do you
Top
call it?
Rod,
Hot broad, unless
Johnny be good.
unless hot broad comes out and he whips it out in the next month. Then yeah, I think this team is probably, and the injuries too. The injuries are
But
gonna be
he's
big too.
producing, so I don't know. You know, at the end of the day, as enticing as it is, like the Blues are one of the most unpredictable teams in the league. Like a Booch, a Zook. I feel like those are guys that could return for like they would take a pay cut. They would take something of that nature. That's like, oh, he's a real one because he was a Ranger. I think Chris Drury doesn't like Pavel Buchnevich. Which we've established here on the podcast, I think before, just from reports that came out over the summer. But um, overall, though, with Johnny B, he is producing. So it's almost like, do you take him out of lineup? Because I think he's a better in that position than Kako and Wheeler were. It's going to be interesting because something of the entire episode, we are now over an hour. We're still talking Rangers hockey here. We have not once mentioned Philip Hedel. I think that goes to show you how well this team's performing because he is crucial to the team's success.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up injuries because we don't know where we stand. And when I mention injuries, we don't know where Cockrell's going to be. We don't know where Hedo's going to be. Maybe these guys come back and tear it up. Maybe these
Mhm.
guys are not able to come back. Maybe these guys come back and they're slid right into Blake with slid into being a Blake Wheeler in the lineup. So I don't know. It's all again, it's all going to play itself out. And what we're talking about now will be completely different, I'm sure, at the trade deadline. That's how fast hockey changes. Maybe this team hits a slump. Maybe this team continues a win streak. I don't know. That's what I love about hockey. Is you just don't know.
You never know. But they say that about football, but the script writers for the NFL this season, I don't think they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Hopefully, the script writers for the NHL this season. Hopefully, they felt bad for us after being eliminated in the first round last year.
I don't think they did. You know
I
what?
don't think they did
I
either.
will say, I will say, I am happy that we don't have to be showered in like incessant Devils highlights on the internet because last season, just from the jump, was just like the glorification was a bit much. I will say, covering the New York Rangers here. Um, yeah, we could talk about hypotheticals all day, like you said. We'll never know until it happens. But right now, if we're gonna turn on the gravity and come back down to earth, I think with the way the Rangers play, I know we sadly have recorded this before this Maple Leafs game. I love a game against the Maple Leafs.
Me too.
Um, again, there's a lot of implications game by game, and you can only take it one day at a time. Like you said, Saturday's match in Boston, I feel like isn't necessarily a sleeper, but I don't feel it's had the emphasis. I feel like with what's recently gone on, everything's really taking things. Everything is day by day, right? You can only take things day by day, but I feel like when the Rangers were rolling, it was like, oh, circle, New Jersey, circle, Boston. Like, I feel that if the Rangers get to Boston and can play well, I feel like they feel more lucky. And that might have to be with the recent news of Miller not playing now. Things like that put a damper on things, Steve O.
Yeah, and how about this? I was right about this last week. I said the Rangers would struggle against Washington and rebound against the Kings. I was right about that. I'll say this. I would look for the Rangers, hopefully at this point, to play well against the Leafs. Come out there. I think the Rangers will play well against the Ducks, and I wouldn't be surprised if them struggle against the Bruins. That's
You
my
know
take.
what? I think that's a good forecast for if we're calling it how we see it. See some clouds in the distance. All right, I can see that. I find the Rangers haven't played well in Boston ever. Maybe that's a hot take. I feel like the last time they won a big game was like the Thanksgiving game like 2 seasons ago. Panarin like knocked a puck out of the air for the game winner. They won like 5-3. Revo was on the team at that time. Um, sad he won't be playing tonight. I don't think. I think he's a healthy scratch, but with the Toronto game, he was a real one. I actually met him. That was cool. I know I talked about it on the podcast. Anyway, another tangent, but with the Bruins, I think they yeah, I don't know. Rangers, I feel like they don't play well up there.
I agree. I think at this point next week when we're previewing Leafs round two, I think 2-1 would be where I say this team would be at. I would think. What do you
Next
think?
three. All right. Who knows? I feel like Anaheim for the longest time was like a team that I think we're supposed to, at least with the hockey news, have Alexis Downey on. She's a one of the reporters for and TV personalities for the Anaheim Ducks. We'll see what she says about that game, but from what I've sensed from long range is that they they like were a team that would like they were like a Flyers team, or like they had that resiliency of the Sharks right now. Early in the season, and I feel like they kind of gotten away from that. Like I haven't heard about Trevor Zegras at all.
You're right.
So
And look, where we want to be, I look at this Ducks team. This is a team we should beat. Not gonna say
mhm.
that we will beat them. I'm saying on paper, this is well, at least our aspirations this year and what we've shown. This is a team that we should beat.
Yeah, that should be a dub. That should be a dub. Yeah, and again, like you mentioned, we're gonna be previewing that Leafs game for next week. So it's kind of fun because we'll get a gauge of what the Leafs are about, and then the Rangers go and travel up north in the six to play the Leafs again next week, and we'll be having a guest on for that to talk about more about kind of what happened with the last Leafs game and what's going to happen in almost exactly a week, if not a week, it might be. So that will be very exciting too, Steve.
It will be, and I can't wait to recap it all again next week. We'll see if our prediction is right. Will the Rangers be 2-1 over the course of the next three games? We'll see it coming up this weekend. That'll wrap us up here in this episode of Puck Talk CS. Of course, big matchups coming up as always. Got the Leafs, got the Ducks, and the Bruins coming up. We got the Leafs round two coming up this week on a special guest episode. Be on the lookout for that. Of course, as always, follow us, Puck Talk CS, on the Instagram, the Twitter, the YouTube for all of our contacts, for all of our previews, all of our details, all of our content, of course. And always remember, LGR, and it's just the luck of the puck.